Good afternoon, everyone. And it is quite an honor to have such a chance to share my research with everyone here. And I quite enjoy this morning's conference with those researchers, both from Thailand and Philippines. I actually learned a lot from you, so thank you so much. And I might be the only person who's sharing my not concern on education. As you have seen my screen, and my study is on the cultural communication networks of Chinese Confucius Institutes through the mode of strategic stakeholder engagement. So hopefully we can have some discussion about this, even it is not on education. Please allow me to introduce myself very briefly. Right now, I'm working as a lecturer of English in Chengdu University in China. And also, simultaneously, I am pursuing my EDD degree in Renzi University in the education faculty. And I used to teach Chinese in New South Wales Department of Education, Australia. And so here, next, I'd like to introduce the agenda for my presentation very briefly. So firstly, I will introduce my research very briefly and share my research background to show how did I find the research gap. And the second, I will introduce the theoretic framework of this research based on, that is a strategic stakeholder engagement. And thirdly, I will briefly introduce the network structure of Confucius Institutes, the network synergy of Confucius Institutes, as well as a network strategy of Confucius Institutes worldwide. And lastly, I will draw in a conclusion for my presentation. The first one is the overview of my research. As I have mentioned, I have applied the strategic stakeholder engagement theory proposed by Dahana and to study the development status of Global Confucius Institute through the three components of strategic stakeholder engagement model, namely the network structure, network collaboration, and network strategy. And the purpose of my research is to study the mechanism and network of worldwide Confucius Institutes and to learn how Confucius Institutes enhance China's soft power through cooperation with strategic stakeholders around the world as partners and taking advantage of the current global interest in Chinese language and Chinese culture. Besides, my research also studied how Confucius Institutes assist the strategic stakeholders to establish a network of relationships to achieve the dual layer embeddings of the education system and the social environment, and strive to closely meet local needs through multi-level cooperation. In 2002, the Chinese government started to think about setting up institutions to promote Chinese language teaching overseas. And 2 years later, the Office of Chinese Language Council International, which is in Chinese called Hanban, actually that is the headquarters of the Confucius Institutes in Beijing, under the authority of the Chinese Ministry of Education, began to establish Confucius Institutes around the world to promote the teaching of Chinese as a foreign language and for different exchanges and cooperations, such as in educational and cultural fields. Since 2004, China has set up more than 400 Confucius Institutes and 500 Confucius classrooms in 108 countries to promote Chinese languages and culture. Some see them as, some people have seen Confucius Institute as an instrument of Chinese public diplomacy or cultural diplomacy, or more broadly as part of China's soft power strategy. As the most open-minded institution China has ever had, Confucius Institutes are compared to many international agencies like the British Council, Alliance Française in France, and Germany's Goethe Institute, as well as Spain's Alliance Surveillance. Confucius Institute's unique structure is different in terms of considering network approaches to public diplomacy. There is confusion about the theoretical framework to analyze these cultural institutions. Besides this, there is a lack of knowledge about the structure and activities of Confucius Institutes. This article aims to use strategic stakeholder engagement proposed by Rhonda Zahana to analyze Confucius Institute's structural organization and actual activity to furtherly bridge these gaps. Let me introduce the theory, strategic stakeholder engagement, very briefly. It derives from public diplomacy. Public diplomacy can activate a country's soft power. And cultural diplomacy actually is one kind of practice of public diplomacy to manage the international environment by making its cultural resources and achievements known overseas or facilitating cultural transmission abroad. And there are two different paradigms of cultural diplomacy. The first one is hierarchical, and second one is network-based approach. And the first one, the hierarchical, stresses top-down aligned bureaucratical propaganda, while the second one, the network model, emphasizes non-hierarchical cooperation and multi-directional flows of information involving local stakeholders with cross-national collaboration in a joint venture. These collaborations by Zahana can be understood in the context of what she calls a strategic stakeholder engagement. It happens at different levels across information, relational, and networking initiatives. And the basic premise is that a successful networking initiative is when the stakeholders take over responsibility for engagement from the sponsor. The sponsors provide the initial platform for stakeholders to engage so that the network can grow and flourish. Three components are essential for this approach, namely network structure, network synergy, and network strategy. And I will use the threefold typology of strategic stakeholder engagement to analyze the organization and development status of worldwide Confucius Institutes. And the network structure is facilitating message exchange and information flow. Network synergy is building relationship and incorporating diversity. And network strategy here concerns the co-creation of credibility, mastering narratives and identities by using rather than simply disseminating information. Firstly, I will introduce the network structure of Confucius Institutes, with Hanban, namely the Confucius Institute headquarters in Beijing, as a hub, and the individual Confucius Institutes around the world as nodes. Hanban is responsible for circulating and exchanging information, for coordinating and monitoring relevant information across the distributed network of individual institutes. In the case of Confucius Institutes, however, this simple hub node structure is complicated by the joint venture structure involving foreign universities, so that the network becomes a potentially multi-directional one, complicating the flow of information from the hub to the nodes. And next is a network synergy of Confucius Institutes. Network synergy here can be illustrated in the two aspects. The first one is building relations within the network. The second one is building relations outside the network, as others are attracted to the network, which should incorporate diversity into the network. With regard to building relations within the network, Confucius Institutes can engage in internal bonding and team building, and they are involved in both teaching and cultural activities. With regard to building external relationships, Confucius Institutes have been to establish links to local communities, with Confucius classrooms being developed in cooperation with local schools, as well as enrollment in Confucius Institutes courses by interested public from the community, as well as staff and students from the host institutions. And Confucius Institutes also have developed tailored language courses with local businesses. And the third one is a network strategy of Confucius Institutes. The network strategy, in other words, can be called co-creation of credibility. Such credibility concerns the content provided by Confucius Institutes through non-language events. Confucius Institutes offer various cultural classes such as paper cutting, calligraphy, and organized film screening, song contests, or seminars. And those schedules differ from institute to institute with a local flavor for each institute worldwide. So there is a tendency to incorporate diversity into the programs of Confucius Institutes, which is promoted more by local stakeholders themselves instead of Hanban. And the quantity and quality of those events supplied is directly related to its value and legitimacy. It would be, on the one hand, introducing Chinese culture and language abroad through strategic stakeholder engagement, and on the other, sponsoring academics with a strong background in sinology and China studies from all over the world to conduct research on traditional and contemporary China, to shape a new generation of sinologists. But the second aspect is quite challenging. In conclusion, under the mode of strategic stakeholder engagement, the Chinese Confucius Institutes promote China's soft power effectively through the commitment and cooperation with its local stakeholder worldwide. As a network sponsor, the Confucius headquarters built a comprehensive and resourceful network through approaches of network structure, network synergy, and network strategy. Unlike other cultural institutes that are independently planted in a foreign country, the Confucius Institutes are grafted into the local cultural, sitting through their partnerships with prominent indigenous educational institutions. And that's all for my presentation, for my paper. And thank you for your patience and listening. I'm looking forward to your comments and discussion with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zou, for your very, very fantastic presentation here regarding Confucius Institute, right? Yeah, on education anyway. All right, okay. So the floor, any question? It's time for Q&A session. We still have some like 5 minutes to discuss together regarding to this matter or this title. Any question? If you're interested in some kind of philosophy from China, like Confucius, you can ask the question. Perhaps it may be your future research title. Anyone here, maybe from China or from somewhere else? So now, right now we have here around the world here. If you are interested, to have some kind of teaching or something, you can apply some philosophy from China if you like in your classroom. So you can ask the question. Anyone here, maybe some of you from China, you can ask the question to the researcher so that you can apply this kind of Confucius philosophy in your classroom in the future. It would be very interesting. You can just do it. Any question? No? Any question here?
Yeah, listen.
Ajahn, your mic is.
Sorry. All right.
Okay.
All right. Sorry. Okay, Ms. Zou, let me ask you one question here. Is the Confucius Institutes, right, following the AUA or British Council strategy?
Professor Nipapong, can I beg your pardon? So does Confucius Institute following
AUA? AUA means that American kind of thing, right? Or British Council strategy?
Oh, you mean British Council and
or American alumni, like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. Actually, neither. Confucius Institutes followed none of those policies from any other international institutes worldwide. As I mentioned in my presentation, a lot of researchers have compared Confucius Institute with many other international constitutes, like what you mentioned, British Council, and the one in America, and also the Alliance Française in France, and the Goethe Institute in Germany. But most of those international institutes, they actually planted their institutes in a foreign country independently. But Confucius Institute actually engage in a more collaborative way. Like, for example, my university have a Confucius Institute in a university in the United States, actually in New Hampshire University. And both parties, both American University and Chinese University, we send teachers to teach Chinese or to do some other, academic things in the Confucius Institute. And it's more like a stakeholder collaboration instead of one-party engagement. And also, Confucius Institute have to give more space to the local stakeholders to design or to have their schedules instead of like a top-down hierarchical instruction. It's more like a stakeholder engagement collaboration. But I think British Council and some other institutes worldwide, they just have less collaborations. Like they maybe just send their teachers or staff to do the things. But Confucius Institute actually relied on the local university, the local school a lot. Yes.
All right.
I don't know, did I answer your question or not?
I think it should be okay. I mean, I think it's quite clear anyway. All right, so the floor, any more questions? So if you want to know more about Confucius, institute, I don't know, I mean, like in Thailand, I'm not sure if we have this kind of thing here because it's quite new for some time about the Confucius philosophy. But anyway, I think it's very interesting if we can apply, or you can just come here to Thailand, right, and introduce this kind of thing in Thailand in the future. Is it a part of the title? I mean, of your dissertation, this one?
You mean my dissertation?
Yeah, this is the title of the dissertation or something? Or no?
The title actually is the title of my paper for this conference.
Okay, so it's very interesting anyway. So the floor, any more questions? So no more questions. All right, Ms. Zhou, thank you very much for your presentation and congratulations on your success in this presentation. It was very wonderful here. Okay, thank you very much. All right, and then see you in Thailand. Okay, very soon after the pandemic is over.
Hopefully we can meet soon. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.